What's going on, everybody? Brandon Rust here, live from Bokashi Earthworks, Saturday morning. Hope everybody's having a great day. Start this thing off with a little bit of Chem Dog Cross the Black Lime Reserve. This is a BLR pheno. And it's nice. Hope everybody's having a good day. Figured we talk a little bit about humic fertilizers today. Catch you all up on my trip to North Dakota and the progress. What's up, Mark Nelson? What's up, Eagle Gardens? Hope you're doing well. I'll be on the Eagle Gardens podcast soon. I'll be right back. I gotta go get a lighter. What is going on? So I'm pretty excited. I'm back in the office. We went up to North Dakota, me and Hamilton, and I did a presentation in front of the APUC board, which is a combination of all the heads of the ag department and the commerce and business development departments in North Dakota, and also the heads of North Dakota State University. I was actually a little nervous. I know my presentation wasn't super long or anything. The whole point of why we applied for a grant is because BNI, one of the mining companies out there, asked us to get what's called a feasibility study. So that we're going to have an engineering company basically look at the technology, look at the resource, because what I have come to find out that is even people that are in the tops of their fields, whether it's the governor or whether it's the ag commissioner or whether it's the president of the commerce department or whether it's, any of these types of peoples that are in the heads in top, of their fields, really don't understand the technology that we're presenting, this technology that Dr. George developed. And oftentimes they're like, this has got to be too good to be true. How can you take this coal that's everywhere in North Dakota and turn it into a complete organic fertilizer? And they know about humic and fulvic acid extractions from things like leonardite, but they are totally unfamiliar and they don't understand that this resource right here contains nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, calcium, magnesium, sulfur, copper, zinc, manganese, molybdenum, boron. It's got sodium. It's got a little chloride. It's got some, humic and fulvic acids. In the whole process, and what we're doing and what we're, presenting to them is essentially, without giving away proprietary information, how this process works. We're looking at the difference in energy versus conventional fertilizer production. It's much less expensive from an energy standpoint. In fact, I'll give you an example. 66 million BTUs to produce 1 metric ton of urea. To make urea, you have to make nitrogen, ammonium from the Haber-Bosch process, and then it has to be blended with carbon oxide to make urea. Now, 66 million BTUs for 1 metric ton of something that only contains nitrogen. It takes us 900,000 BTUs to produce 1 metric ton of a complete fertilizer that is carbon chelated to fulvic and humic acids. So what we do is we micronize this. This gets crushed up and oxidized. And what happens during that process is, because this contains a high percent of organic matter, the oxidation process increases the fulvic acid content. Once it's micronized down to about 200 mesh, the humic and fulvic acid are extracted with phosphoric acid and potassium hydroxide, and then an organic catalyst is introduced that actually creates the reaction that binds all of the nutrient elements to the humic and fulvic acid. Then after the reaction process, it goes into stabilization tanks where the pH is, where everything is stabilized. And we end up with this. So they actually thought it was too good to be true when I told them what I was doing, and they didn't actually believe me when I first went out there, when I spoke to the president of P&I. So I actually sold him a bottle and said, well, we're already making the product. It's already being manufactured. It's a real thing, I can assure you. So, yeah, we got the grant. We went and looked at a really, really cool piece of property. We looked at several different pieces of property. We looked in Bismarck. We also drove over to Fargo. We found a super awesome, almost 6-acre property. The warehousing space is less than what we need, but it has complete rail access where the train can actually come in to bring us the raw materials. And then we can also load the finished product to export to the other parts of the country. So I'm really excited about this spot, and I'm going to have some conversations with my business partners and my attorney probably on Monday to talk about my idea on acquiring that piece of property and then building out the additional warehousing space. It's absolutely beautiful spot. It's pretty new. It was built in 2014, and it's just that rail access, man. It's just so awesome. I mean, being able to bring in metric tons, 30, 40, 50,000 metric tons of raw material to process on a train logistically makes much more sense and is much more economically viable than having a bunch of dump trucks. So yeah, we're making moves, we're doing the thing, and it's crazy because I was really thinking about it, and I was like, there's only a few of us, a handful of us, maybe, half a dozen or more people that really understand the technology, that understand the process, that understand the chemistry, that understand the resource and the logistics. And out of all of the people in the entire world, I am the only person that can do this project. So I was thinking about that. It's pretty daunting. It's pretty crazy to think about it like that. But I set huge goals, and I have huge aspirations for what I can do because I know this technology can change industrial fertilizer manufacturing process, reduce energy costs, and reduce and eliminate that environmental impact that's associated with those processes. And so it's a huge responsibility, but man, I'm ready for it. And really, I just take it a day at a time, one step at a time, take, all the small steps to get to the end. And so I've been working on it. It's been working out. A lot of you guys have helped support in the process. So I appreciate it. So right now, my venture capital company that I'm working with is like really eager to give us this $5 million. But what we want to do is we really want to be cautious about taking on money because we're responsible at 6% interest for $300,000 annually until that $5 million is paid off. So my thoughts were, if we can secure this spot, it's listed for $2.7 million. I'm pretty sure that they take 2.1. So if I was to get that money, put around $300,000 down or $400,000 down on the property, purchase the property so that way we're not paying a lease where we would probably have to pay about $7.50 a square foot for, a 30,000 square foot property. It's over $100,000 a month, over $150,000 a month in rent. And so if we owned it, it would probably be around $24,000 a month, which is a lot, right? And that's a lot of overhead plus the additional interest that we have to pay back for the loan. So getting set up for the humic and fulvic acid extraction, and then sending it actually to the factories that are already producing, and then finding large purchase orders, become cash flow positive while we're doing the additional build out for humate fertilizers. So we could set up the equipment to extract the humic and fulvic acids first, and then we can implement all the rest of the equipment later. So I'm just thinking about different ways now, trying to really think about the logistics and the best way to get to cash flow in the fastest possible manner, because, you know, obviously this isn't about money. This is about implementing change. But when it comes to investors, it is about money. And so it's my responsibility to lay things out for the business to make sure that we get to cash flow for this new business venture as soon as possible. So there's a lot of different ways I'm thinking about approaching it. Again, I have I got good people behind me, and my attorney will always help me out. So we'll see how it works. Awesome. Thank you. I appreciate it. So with all this going on, how much more would your product go up? It's actually going to decrease. So what'll happen is, so right now, so NASA Agricultural Technologies, you know, Dr. George developed this technology over 40 years ago, so in the really early 80s. And what he did is, in around like 1982 or 1983, he went down to South America and built his first fully integrated factory. He was even bypassing the Haber-Bosch process and using a humic, fulvic, and a catalyst to capture atmospheric nitrogen under pressure to produce nitrogen and increase the nitrogen levels. The government was like, this is amazing. They were being lobbied by ag corporations, and they ended up buying his first facility after about 10 years in production. Then in 1992, he started to build an $80 million production plant with the World Bank. He got half of the money from the World Bank as a development project, a sustainable development project, right after the Kyoto protocols were implemented. So if you're not familiar with the Kyoto protocols, it was an international peace treaty between over 160 countries that outlined sustainable development. And basically it goes like this. We don't have a scientific model that is accurate enough or that can predict things like weather patterns, carbon emissions, the impact of things like agriculture, and just natural climate change. So they're like, well, we don't know if we're having an impact, but we should probably not just do nothing, because if we are, we could be creating a problem. So they straight up say they don't know if climate change is, you know, caused by human activity, and because there's too many considerations to take in place, and they just didn't have the types of computer modeling technology, then they might have better accuracy now, and they could probably do things with AI and quantum computing. But they implemented these to be proactive, these treaties, and they basically outline things like carbon credits and sustainable development, and, you know, incentivizing those types of things, so that way we don't move into a negative place if our actions do have a negative impact. Me personally, I know climate change is real, but climate change can be just like caused by the sun. I mean, it's a natural phenomenon, and I think globally human activity probably doesn't cause much. The problem is that human population is large enough, and we've put up restrictive barriers, so humans can't naturally migrate like they would have thousands of years ago when populations were smaller. So when things do change, what we're actually seeing is a greater impact on people that don't have the ability to migrate out of those areas to where there's better resources or better climate. And so I think that's kind of the issue that we see. But so he developed this technology. That project in Greece got scrapped because a bunch of crazy ass shit happened, like a bunch of crazy stuff. Like Dr. George was running for prime minister at the time, and there was like an assassination attempt and all kinds of crazy stuff. So he got the hell out of there, came back to came back to the States, and what ended up happening was he went over to China in the early 2000s. He met a woman out there, and they ended up building a factory out there. And then they came back to the States, and then they were working on building a factory in Ohio in 2008. Market crashed, project got scrapped because of all of that stuff and some other political stuff. And then ended up going down to Mexico. He built a factory down in Mexico, and all those facilities are all running right now. But the thing is, logistically, we have all the resource here in the US. So when I started this project, I was, looking at what the best locations would be to produce this. And so we first wanted to see where the best sources of lignite were. So what we started to do was we started calling up different places all over the country and asking for samples. And so we started, finding natural resource locations that were already pulling this stuff up out of the ground. And we're like, okay, we're going to test this. And so we tested stuff from Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, Missouri, Illinois, North Dakota, I think Virginia, I don't know if West Virginia, and one other fucking place. We sent this off to the lab to look at the nutrient content and the nutrient makeup and the amount of humic and fulvic acids, because the higher the amount of humic and fulvic acids, the greater the amount of nutrients that formulation can hold. So we're looking at, what is the mineral content of this? And what we found was that the highest amount of both nutrients and humic and fulvic acid and organic carbon was in the waste material from the mining operations in North Dakota that they're using for energy. This was kind of a bonus for us, because if we're able to take a waste product and convert it into something that has long-term carbon storage and increases soil health and fertility, especially over long term, then that's something that everybody can get on board with. So we had called one of the companies in North Dakota and inquired about getting samples. And the reason why was because we were looking at the resource as an export. So, me and my business partners are like, okay, well, we've got so much good lignite here in the US, and there's other countries now that are looking at this, for fertilizers. And so I was looking to export, metric tons, like, tens of thousands of metric tons to other countries. And they were curious what we're doing, because nobody ever calls an energy company and says, hey, do you guys have any coal that we can buy from you? And so they were really curious. And I ended up hopping on the phone with Mike Hager, president of BNI. He reached out and he said, hey, we have some questions. We'd love to know what you guys are doing. So we had a Zoom call and we're telling him, hey, yeah, so, Dr. George, he created this formulation. This is what we sell. It's made from lignite. They're like, we've never heard of anything like this. He's like, this has got to be too good to be true. And I was like, no, this is what we do. We're looking to export this. We're looking to build a factory, in an area of the US where we have good access to, good quality material. And he's like, you know what? I think you should come up to North Dakota. And so I was like, yeah, man, I'd love. He's like, we'd really like to meet you and talk more in person about what it is you're doing. So I was scheduled, and maybe 2 or 3 weeks later to go up there. Maybe it was a month. I don't know. It wasn't too long after that we spoke, that I had tickets to North Dakota. And he set up meetings with the heads of the Commerce Department, with the Ag Department, with the Lignite Energy Council, um, and the president of the mining companies. And so I basically went to all these different people that are in the, the heads of state in those departments, and explained what I wanted to do. And they were like, this is crazy. We've never heard of anything like this. Like, how does this work? And they were so curious, and like, they're like, let's fucking go. Let's do this. And so they're like, look, you should apply for primary sector. So I talked to the Commerce Department, like, oh, we would love to have a project like this because it aligns with reduced energy costs, it American manufacturing, and it ties into energy and agriculture, which are the two largest sectors in North Dakota. And so they're like, this sounds like an amazing project. So I incorporated the business, joint venture between Bokashi Earthworks and NASA Agricultural Technologies. And then what we did was we applied for primary sector. They gave us that. So they're like, okay, you don't have to pay taxes in North Dakota for the first 4 years in business. So I'm like, that is fucking awesome. They're like, because you're going to bring so much value to North Dakota through this technology. We're going to be able to divert waste product. We're going to be able to keep not just sustainable fertilizer technology, but economic sustainability. So like, we have production, we're creating jobs, we're creating new products, we're creating long-term soil health, and it's all green manufacturing, right? So there's no waste byproduct. And so they gave us that, and then they're like, you should also apply for the grant. And they like, they're the ones that suggested that we do it. So we kind of went into this knowing that we were going to get the grant, because the whole thing is they don't really understand what the hell I'm saying when I try to tell them about this. I'm like, because they're like, wait, it contains nitrogen. I was like, look, it's on the test. It contains nitrogen. But also the process increases nitrogen because there's nitrogen in the atmosphere. It's very complicated technology. And when I'm trying to break it down to them, they're like, it's too good to be true. And so what they want to do is they want to validate the technology, because once I have the feasibility, marketing analysis, and they understand the impact, not just in North Dakota, but globally, that this can have, what's going to end up happening is there's going to be so many people that are going to want to back these projects. We're like so close. We just need to figure out. We're super close. We just need to figure out the quickest way to cash flow before we accept the offer that we have on the table right now. So I've been doing things like, I went to Big Brand Ventures, which is Kevin Harrington. He's one of the original Shark Tanks. It's called the Shark Tank Retreat, right? Or the Shark Retreat. And you go out there and you it's limited. There's like, I don't know, 12 or 15 people. And you have to go through a fucking interview and all this other stuff. So I went and did that. I went out to Colorado and I was talking to them. They talked about marketing, customer acquisition, different technology integrations that you could put into the website to do track and do all these other things. And so I learned a lot, but they were also already really impressed with what I was doing, because they didn't fully understand. Like they didn't have the vision. They don't have the vision that I do. So I don't think you can really like fully understand unless you can have that vision. And so they may not have had the vision, but they understood the product and they understood the business really well. And so I've allowed to be able to stay connected. And so I get invited, every couple of weeks to a little business seminar Zoom chat where there's between 40 and 50 usually people in there, and you have Kevin Harrington and his team, and you can go in there and you can listen to other people and ask questions and kind of interact. And so I've got all these like different like cool things that I've been learning in business and stuff like that, and it's really helping, so. But yeah, Just watered some microbes yesterday. Major General says, sounds sketchy. Not sketchy at all. The green economy. Well, here's the thing. So there are things that I think shouldn't be incentivized, right? A good example of this is like wind. I'm not a big fan of wind, and it's not because, and I'm someone who's for like green manufacturing, reduce waste, better logistics, better resource management, because that's what it really comes down to: energy, resource, and logistics. That's what we have to look at when we're talking about any of these things, organic or non-organic. It doesn't matter. We're really looking at the logistics and how these things function, and looking at the life cycle of these things in totality. And so when we're talking about things like wind, for instance, so we're looking at how much energy goes into the production of the actual parts. What are the life cycle of those parts? How frequently are they going to have to be changed out? How much labor is going to have to go into it? Whether or not you're in an area that's going to get consecutive wind. So all those things are factors. And when you break them down and look at like environmental impact too, the places around those areas that are impacted. So we have to look at all these different factors and kind of create a holistic logistical view of what we're looking at. And so if the materials aren't there and those things are corroding, or half the time the rings that make them run, they just get fucking burnt out. And then if you don't, it could be windy and they're stopped. Okay, well, it's because those things are broken down. So looking at things holistically, they're eyesores for me. He says, just the game is making the factory, not the product. No, the product is. The biggest issue we have is inventory management, because we always have to have more inventory on hand but it's a logistical problem because we don't have the manufacturing here. So once we have the manufacturing here, we'll be able to do larger purchases and all that other stuff. Yes. And the thing is, if you look at, and one of the things too, so if we're looking at like at fertilizers in the US, a large majority of fertilizers are imported because there's really only the big four. The big four are the chemical manufacturing companies. And regardless of, unless you yourself are manufacturing, those are the people that are manufacturing, chemical fertilizers, whether it's ammonium through the Haber-Bosch process, and then combining that with phosphate that's produced by soluble. Look, to make phosphorus is fucking crazy. It's so logistically insane. If you want to make phosphorus, you first have to build a massive sulfuric acid plant so you can manufacture sulfuric acid by burning sulfur products, capturing that, letting it precipitate. It's crazy. It takes a fucking ton of energy, and the engineering and designing on it is gnarly. So that's the first thing, to make phosphorus fertilizer. Second thing you do, you have to get really cheap, high quality rock phosphate mined, and then it has to be processed, right? So it has to be crushed, micronized, and then they use that sulfuric acid, and they basically solubilize and liberate the phosphate from that rock material. They take all the rest of it away, and then you have phosphate. They take that phosphate and they blend it with the ammonium that's produced through the Haber-Bosch process, where they take atmosphere, they put it under tons of pressure and heat, they introduce a catalyst, and it just keeps running. And it's only 15% efficiency. It has to keep running over and over, but it'll precipitate. It cools and precipitates out liquid ammonium. They take that liquid ammonium and that liquid phosphate, and they blend them together to make either diammonium or monoammonium phosphate, also known as DAP and MAP. Those are conventional chemical fertilizers. Those processes are fucking insane, and they cost the amount of money that you would have to spend just on the engineering, just the design on those plants. You have to be fucking insanely wealthy, right? So there's only four, the big four guys that do that. And it's like, it's super taxing from an energy standpoint because one, you need super cheap gas for the hard robotic process to work because you're both burning gas and you're putting that's how you're into the process. So logistically, when we're looking, and then a lot of those are manufactured in not here in the US. There are fertilizer manufacturers here in the US, but a large portion of those are then imported into the country. So we've become basically chemically dependent on fertilizer imports. What's up, Carly? I will see you soon in Puerto Rico at the CanMed event. That'll be coming up. Yeah, it's crazy, dude. And here's the thing, like whenever all of these natural resources, whether it's gas, whether it's oil, whether it's phosphate, whether it's cobalt, these things, or whether it's lithium, right? These are all resources that have to be managed, and there's always some type of geopolitics behind them. I'm not trying to, get into political science, but when it comes to energy, resource, and the logistics, oftentimes there's politics attached to it. And so it's the nature of the beast when it's because it really comes down to managing those things properly. It's crazy. Sweet. Yep, that Mach 1 Starfighter is straight gasoline. Chunkers. You'll get nice big old fatty spears on that thing. It's really pretty, so it's got great bag appeal, but the best thing about it is that when you pop open that fucking bag, pow, it just fucking kicks you in the face. It's my favorite. So that's what's happening in North Dakota. We're going to get the feasibility study done. What we'll do is we have a company that we're working with. They are an engineering company that works in the ag space. It was really actually hard to find somebody that even understood what I was talking. I was talking to engineers and they didn't know what I was talking about, dude. And it's like, how the hell did I get to this point? Because if I would have, reflecting 5 years ago, I would have never even thought I would have been here. So you never know what the world is going to give you. Always walk through the doors of opportunity. So we had to make tons of different phone calls to try to find a company that could even do a feasibility study on this project. But it took us a little while, but we finally found somebody, and they had to bring in some other people in the company. Like we had to talk to several different people and kind of like their whole team so they could kind of have a comprehensive understanding of what we needed. Because once we get that done, though, it basically validates the technology for all the people that are like, we want to see this and we want to invest, and to scale this thing out with you. And so that's what we're doing. We have to pay for it, and then we get reimbursement. It's a reimbursement grant, so we can get reimbursed for whatever money we spend every month. How do you take a plant? Well, you shouldn't discharge your runoff because it's not a salt-based system. So if you're running cocoa, I would recommend running really, really low milliliters per gallon, probably like 1.5 to 3, with maybe just like a little bit of micronutrient additive. And what's happening is the humates actually will coat the organic matter. You have to realize that cocoa is an organic substrate. And the same thing with even with the soil colloids that are non-organic colloids, mineral colloids. The humate will actually coat those. It's kind of like just it's very similar to the way that biofilms work, like mono and polysaccharides. And so it keeps it in place and it won't precipitate. The reason why people in cocoa and rock wool, they're doing drain to waste is because a lot of the nutrients that they use aren't actually compatible. And this is why you see batch tanks in facilities where you'll have, this, and they might have 4 or 5 different tanks where they're adding things. And it's because when you start to add nutrient salts, there's a lot of different things that aren't compatible. A good example of this is calcium nitrate and potassium phosphate. And it's because what happens is when the phosphate ion is liberated in solution, it has a negative charge. And when that calcium is nutrient ion is liberated in solution and it has a positive charge, those things can bind together. So that's an example of a precipitation reaction. That can also happen, phosphorus can precipitate with iron and zinc and copper and manganese as well. And so what happens is you get basically salt buildups of these insoluble salts that kind of cause osmotic stress on your plant. And so to avoid that, they're just kind of letting everything run through. With humates, what happens is it stops those precipitation reactions. Because if you were to add, let's say, humates to your base, nutrient solution, when your salts go into solution, they're dissolved, right? And during that process, you're liberating. It's breaking the bond between the nutrient ions, because every salt has at least 2 nutrients that are binded together. DAP, diammonium phosphate, is positively charged ammonium, negatively charged phosphate. If you look at potassium phosphate, positively charged potassium, negatively charged phosphate. Those molecules dissociate in the presence of water. And the humate, right, especially the fulvic acid, will actually bond. Because what happens, there's an exchange between hydrogen where all of those positively charged nutrient ions will bind with the fulvic acid, creating an organically complexed nutrient. And the benefit of that is that when those things are chelated, it's just like why they use iron EDTA in hydroponics, right? Is because iron oxidizes and becomes unavailable, and it can react with other nutrients very easily because it'll give off its electrons so easily, right? And so it's that kind of same concept. When it's chelated with that EDTA, it stops that reaction from happening. And it's the same thing with the organic complexion between humic and fulvic acid. It stops those reactions from happening, so you don't get the precipitation reactions. So I discourage people from doing runoff, or do very light, if any at all, if you are running humates and cocoa. I heard marijuana makes you a genius. I don't know about that, but it can definitely change your perceptions on reality and what is and what, on what's possible. Really about the work, man, putting in work. Like I said, like one of the things that I have come to really realize, and you have to train your mind. It's like, and it can be a struggle. If you want to get to a point where like you can find happiness and peace and not be stressed, a lot of it has to do with just staying in the moment, because like a lot of fears that we have are unfounded. They're like the what ifs. Like those things aren't real. They're just projections. It's basically our imagination running wild. We shouldn't indulge in things like that. It's like the Jedi say or whatever, be mindful of your thoughts, so a lot of I think things get hampered by the what ifs. And if you just focus on the now, okay, what can I do at this moment So that way the outcome of what I'd like to see has a higher probability of occurring, because that's what everything is. Like, I'm pretty sure we live in like a singularity, and like we can manifest things, but we have to do a certain like work in the now to like make the probability of what is now like to what you want it to be. I don't know if that makes sense, but so, but if you guys got questions about the humates and stuff, now would be the time. We can smoke a fucking bowl. And cool thing too. So we have we're working with the University of Mississippi right now, doing trials with humate, so we can get some updated stuff on like nutrient density. And I think they're doing corn on this trial, so that'll be really awesome. Look at higher protein content in food, and then also looking at the increase in carbon in the soil from the use of it. I think it would be also beneficial to look at the soil microbiome, like do a genetic essay on the soil, and see what the difference is, what we're using, humates versus conventional control plot. I know AI will be a major job killer guaranteed. Nah, dude. AI is fucking awesome. In fact, AI will be, I don't think people understand what's about to happen, because they're going to connect the AI to quantum computing. They're like, people, the world is going to change. Yeah, Bavaria Bassiana. Bam. Yeah, I got cases. Cases are in. You just got to ask for it at checkout and replace it with the trike or the bacillus. Look at that white fungus. That white fungus. I love this stuff. This is one of my favorite microbes. I have all of my favorite microbes. I have some microbes too that are cool, that do cool stuff, like kill root knot nematode. Hard for me to pronounce that one, though. I haven't said it enough times. I can say Bavaria Bassiana 3 times fast, but I can't remember the other one. Harzianum. We have Trichoderma harzianum. Here's the thing, though. You can already see like so much stuff is fake, and they use AI, and you have to remember, like, when these types of technologies come out and they get first developed, they're usually developed in a lab. Maybe they have a private contract with military defense contractor, or with the, something like that. And so I always think that we're getting, things that are technologically maybe 10 years already, behind what they possess. And so I question pretty much everything I see, because I think what's going to happen is it's going to be much harder to discern truth from reality, because you can see something visually that could upset you and incite a type of emotion, and that's how you get hijacked, right? You hijack your emotions. It's one of the wizard's rules. Passion rules reason. So we have to have logical and reasoning, because once you let your emotions get hijacked by whatever subject content, it's much easier to subvert and control and create a narrative, build on that narrative, and that's not conducive for free thinking people. So the world will change, but I think that nothing can replace humans. I think the access to information and technology the rate of technological growth is going to be fucking insane. I'm not saying this lightly. I think that the rate of growth is going to be so hard to keep up with that we're going to see things in our lifetime that we never, ever, ever expected to see. I mean, I imagine that they finally are like, hey, we've been able to reverse gravity and engineer, craft that can travel, almost infinite amount of spaces in zero time. And I'm sure we're going to see all of that stuff. I'm sure we're going to see, it's going to be a wild ride. I mean, whatever your imagination, what all the science fiction, I think this is the age where everything becomes science fact. That's the biggest problem, who will have control. Here's the thing too, you can always opt out of all this stuff. You don't have to have a cell phone, you don't have to have an email. I mean, you could live sustainably off grid and completely independent. That's the real foundations of true independence anyway, is self-sufficiency. So you can be self-sufficient and not rely on any of these things, then it really don't fucking matter who the president is or what tariffs are, or who you don't like in politics. It doesn't fucking matter, because you're not reliant on any of that. And as long as you have the ability to defend yourself, you should be good. You know what I mean? The silicon bong. Oh, yeah, no. The only reason I smoke out of this fucking thing, I don't like it at all. It's because this is the office bong. And if this was glass, it would break. And I know that because the other one's broke. So this is it right here. This is what we use around the office. Can I explain how the carbon can chelate nutrients but also cool down a compost pile with too much? Oh, yeah, how it can cool it down. Yeah. Okay, so the first question is this. Can I explain how carbon can chelate nutrients? So naturally what happens is when organic material is decomposing, or if you have something like, humic fulvic substance from decaying organic matter, or even things like some compounds that are created through microbial metabolism, things like maybe citrate or something like acetate, acetic acid. Those are organic compounds, and they can bond. I had made a thing here before, but essentially they make these carbon bonds between carbon, oxygen, and hydrogen, and they make these chains, and the hydrogen can basically be replaced. So whenever you have a hydrogen grouping, because hydrogen is really different in chemistry, right? It doesn't have a nucleus. It's just an electron and a proton, but it can be just a proton. So in this case, it's like COO, and it's not really like an element. It's basically a charge. And so the charges, they can basically they can share that charge between the nutrient ions. So like calcium or magnesium, iron, zinc, manganese, copper, whatever. And so they build these they can build these, these organic complexes where they're, different molecules, carbon-based molecules with nutrients attached to them, making these chains. And depending on the size of those chains, the smaller size chains, which are the fulvic acid group of molecules, they can stay soluble in any pH range. And so the plant, and they can be, and they're bioavailable, neutralizes the charge, and the plant can actually uptake that without having to regulate its electrical chemical gradient within that plant. So, and then if you have like a larger chain, like a humic acid, what that does is it allows for like slower release, like over time, it'll release that. And then the carbon dynamics with nitrogen dynamics is really about like, so if your compost pile is too hot, right? There's too much nitrogen and it's heating up, and you add carbon into it. What's happening is there's a process in the nitrogen cycle where when you stimulate the metabolism of the microorganisms, they're going to start consuming that nitrogen, right? And so what they do is they're immobilizing that nitrogen in that process until those, microorganisms are then themselves cycled. Whether they're cells lice or whether they get consumed by a protozoa or nematodes or whatever like that. That's why the carbon to nitrogen ratio is really important, because you'll either get, depending on the ratio, you'll either get net mineralization or net release of nitrogen, or you'll get immobilization, where it's basically not getting to the plant. Was there any hesitancy for the North Dakota coal industry to support the cannabis industry, or was that even a consideration for them? I mean, my project doesn't have anything to do with cannabis. You know what I mean? I'm from cannabis. I'm always going to help educate in this space. And the reason why is because cannabis farmers, home growers are much more knowledgeable than a lot of even ag people. And I was talking to a guy from the Netherlands a couple of weeks ago, and he was, he's saying the same thing. Like, he's like, look, I have a background in horticulture in the Netherlands. He's like, but I love talking to the cannabis people because they're the people that are most up to date on the technology, whether it's lights or humidification, whatever it is. They're the people that know the most about nutrients and the dynamics and VPD, and like they really understand, and they take extra effort and time to learn these things because they're passionate about it. And so I'll always work in this space, and that's one of the reasons why I love working in this space, because I can talk to you guys about these types of projects and you guys understand what I'm talking about. It's like I could go to a professional, I could go to somebody, in that I could go to, a professional, like, in the Department of Commerce, and be like, hey, this is what we want to do. And they have a general understanding. But it's not like I said, you guys understand, I feel that you guys understand the vision better than most people. But it's not really, this is about sustainable development. This is about mitigating waste. This is about regenerating soil, creating, better industrialized standards for, the production of things that we need for, global economics. It's not going to stop. I mean, here's the thing. I know there's a lot of people that'll be like, fuck this and fuck that and this and that. And it's like, none of that is going to stop. So you can either be proactive and try to implement change, because otherwise it's just like screaming at a wall, in my opinion. You have to be able to take action. And that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to implement the change like that I wanted to see. I'm trying to do it at the highest levels that I can possibly operate and hopefully perform at my best. So I think that they see this and they understand, the impact that could potentially have, but they also understand the challenges. One of the biggest challenges is, if a farmer can go and purchase, a ton of diammonium phosphate for, $1,000 a ton, but my product costs, $5,000 a ton or $6,000 a ton, they're going to be like, well, I can't pay that. And so it's about educating. Well, here's the thing. You're going to use far more less of this product. You might be using 2 to 400 pounds of fertilizer per acre using conventional fertilizers, where you're only maybe using 30 kilos, per acre with other product. And then as you go through multiple years of doing the same thing, you're using less because your soil becomes more fertile, as opposed to that soil becoming more acidic and releasing, like if you go to the majority of the places that grow crops in the US, they're usually under 2% organic matter. And oftentimes they're even less. Like the plot that we're working on at Mississippi State has 0.8%, 0.8, less than 1% organic matter. And that's pretty much dirt. It's really difficult growing conditions. And it's basically like they have to implement, things like DAP, MAT, muriate of potash, and chelated micronutrients. And then they'll also have to sometimes, lime if they have to, or they'll have to do something to balance the pH. Well, it's elemental sulfur. And so it's a lot that they would have to add, as opposed to, building up that organic carbon content. So you're building up soil health. Everything's based off of the cycling of nutrients, and it's all about the energy. The energy in that soil is the carbon, right? The carbon is what feeds the biology, houses the biology. The biology creates the enzymes that solubilizes the parent apatite material, that liberates nutrient ions, that grow the crops, that break down the organic roots, that create structure and more biology and polysaccharides to aggregate soil together and make water infiltration and gas exchange better. All of those things, there's a lot to it. When I'm planting seeds, I don't know, man. I just kind of toss them in there. I don't even really. Free energy may exist, man, but I don't know how to fucking do it. It would be great. It would be great, man, if we could harness it. I just don't know, man. I haven't seen it. I've seen a lot of stuff. I've watched all the crazy conspiracy theories. I'm into it. I can get down. Let's go. Free power. But, who's got it? There's people that control this world. Like there's like 300 families control basically all of global economics. And you can read it about in 300. It's a book. Talks about, so all it talks about. I'm just reading some of these comments. Depends on your size. This bottle usually lasts me. I have 2 3x3 beds in my little shed that I put together. I insulated it and sealed the floor. But I have a couple of soil beds, and I only use 30 milliliters per gallon. So I'm using 150. Hold on. I use 150 milliliters, right? 3, 6, 9, 12. Yeah, I use 150 milliliters 2 or 3 times for my whole cycle. So it depends on how I'm doing it. If I'm doing Sea of Green and I have a lot more plants, I'm usually doing less veg time. So I'm usually only doing the humates twice, and I'm using it more of it as an additive, because here's the thing, it has a 96% use efficiency. So it's not going to precipitate it. The plant it's going to be available in the soil. It's going to stay there in the soil in an available form. And so it's super efficient. You don't have to use much. That's one of the greatest benefits about it, is that it, from a conventional standpoint, like large ag perspective, that's the hardest hurdle, because they're going to say, oh, how much does it cost? And it's like, well, it costs, more than what you're paying for your, you're going to pay maybe, 15% more on your cost. This is large production. This is cheap for home growers comparative to like what other products sell their stuff for. But they're going to look at, let's say if a farmer's like, I'm only going to spend $140 an acre on fertilizer. So that's my budget. It's like, well, if that farmer were to spend, let's say $200, which is more than he wants to spend, but the he has to look at the long-term benefits and the productivity, right? The decrease in, again, you have to look at it at logistics. So the decrease in the amount of types of things that you would spray. So eliminating things like pesticides because you have healthier plants that have a higher protein and calcium content. The benefits that you get from higher nutritional density, the benefit that you get from, the upregulation and the upregulation of different genes from the stimulation of that soil microbiome through that carbon. All of that stuff is just, yeah, every office needs bong. So it takes several runs for me. Like if you're running like a 4x4 tent or something like that, if you bought the bundle on the site, because we have like a bundle page where you can like do like the basic, there's like an advanced, there's a pro, there's a master, which has like basically all of the products just in a bundle, and it's just a little bit discounted because it's bundled all together. It's gonna last. Every office needs a bong. Cheers to that. Yeah. I was thinking at one time of getting a fish tank and just putting this like the pipe and grave bong yard, just all the glass pieces that I've broken. I guess it kind of does a little bit. Morning woody stems. Every office should have a hot secretary. No, we don't have a secretary. No secretary here. We just basically tested for the things that were required to test for. So if you go and look, that shows heavy metals, it shows so we did heavy metals tests, micronutrients, so whole nutrient panel. So I think all of the essential nutrients, and then also things like sodium, chloride, I think nickel, like a whole metals panel. So we tested for everything. So you can look at it. It's on the website footer. Are there any downside issues from using chelated iron, either as a top dress or liquid form? I mean, those are complex. It's a synthetically created carbon molecule, so it can do some things internally. I'd have to search for it, but I read some science a long time ago, some white papers on the effects of the EDTA long term. I think that they're really hard to break down, and I think what has to happen is that for it to be transferred into the divalent form, and when it's in the plant, I think there has to be some type of process where there's an exchange that costs a lot of energy. But I can't remember the specifics of it. But I mean, if you're going to use it, if that's what you have to use, then use. You could also use iron sulfate. If I need iron, that's what I use. I use iron sulfate because it's natural occurring mineral. It is really susceptible to oxidation, but that's one of the reasons why, I have a certain amount of iron in my soil, and then I use those biocrop steering protocols where I inoculate with the trichoderma and the bacillus. They have the hydroxymates diaphors that naturally chelate that iron and keep it bioavailable. And what they can also do is they can also just convert it back to its divalent form through some enzymatic processes. So it creates, and it's not just for iron. Manganese works very, very similar to iron. It's one of the reasons why they compete for the same spaces on colloids, because they have similar charge density, and they're both available in their divalent form, and they can oxidize into their trivalent form, which is they want to be uptaken in their reduced form. And it's because when they're in their reduced form, they allow for some energy exchange to happen with that hydrogen, that electron, or whatever it is. I'm not a chemist by any means. Why did Texas do? I mean, maybe they just want to do medical. I don't know. People are going to do what they do. I mean, we'll see what happens with it. Here's the thing. You can't be like blame an entire group of people just because there's some people that are ignorant and they do things that are non-conducive for business. Well, iron has a lot to do with the photosynthetic nutrient. So if you have better photosynthesis or better chlorophyll production within the plant, and iron, and here's the thing, iron is tricky. Iron's a tricky one because iron oxidizes very, very easily, and it needs to be in that ferric form, that's divalent form, to be uptaken. So if you have higher iron, you're able to get, more bioavailable iron. It's going to have a positive advantage. Yeah. Well, who knows? I mean, I don't have an opinion on it one way or another. I think that, my opinion is that they just need to decriminalize cannabis altogether. Completely just decriminalize it. Don't legalize it. Don't do that shit. Just fucking take it off. No schedule. It's like we're fucking completely descheduling it. I forgot, man. I forgot who had the insect frass. The 300 Club. Yeah, that's what I was talking about earlier. Yeah. That's actually, I mean, you can call it that if you want, but I mean, that's my my mama, or no, that's my which one is that? What cut is that? I forgot what number. I think that was the number 8. And then I have a another cut that Mama Wolf selected. But it should be fucking grown. Those things are doing their thing. Rave reviews coming in about the Afghani Bull Rider 89 Northern Lights. Yeah, sweet. That's this right here. That's a collaboration between myself and John, aka Green Bodie. Got those. We got those nice seeds in there. Those can be found on the Bokashi Earthwork Seed Vault website. I actually just posted some picture in my stories on IG. Have you brewed any micro batches with honey or maple syrup before, and or think or know it to bring any unique benefits compared to molasses? No, I haven't. No, I've done it the same exact way that I have from the beginning. I suppose you could use honey though. It'd be interesting, but I think it would have the exact same, because you basically could use any pretty much, simple carbohydrate like molasses or brown, raw sugar or whatever. It would pretty much do the same thing. I don't know. I wouldn't know. I mean, it's an interesting idea. But I don't know. I mean, I could definitely test it. I could make a 5-gallon batch using honey, but it would be really expensive. I don't know. And to gauge, how do you gauge the benefits? What do? We would have to test, maybe we do HPLC tests to see all the different chemicals that are in it. see if any of those chemicals are like conducive for like plant growth or upregulation of hormones or something like that. Or I think honey does have antimicrobial properties. I think that's why it lasts so long. I think that's why they found like, you know, honey that's thousands of years old that was still like good. I mean, that's at least what I heard. But again, I've never, I'm not a honey expert. Organic nitrogen in substrate. How many milliliters per liter is ideal to get 2 to 3? Um, so if we're talking about, you have to do a conversion. So milligram per liter to ppm would be point zero. I don't know. I'd have to do the math. I can't do it in my head. It depends. Well, no, I think what you'd have to figure out is how much nitrogen is in the product that you have first. So if it was like 50% nitrogen, and then you needed to get to 200 ppm, I don't know. I'd have to do the math, and I'd have to do it short, like on a piece of paper and crap. The Starfighter times gas V2. It was really like kind of like Mac, there wasn't a whole lot of like, it was uplifting. It wasn't like, it um wasn't super sedative. It was just kind of mellow, kind of just like the Mac is. And it's kind of like almost a, because I took the Mac 1 Starfighter, crossed it to Mac V2. I made F2s of that. I took a male from that line and I crossed it onto my Starfighter. And so the majority of those genetics are just like already Mac 1 Starfighter. Mac 1 Starfighter times Mac V2. So it's like then times Starfighter. So it's really just like that Mac. ZLR? What's the ZLR? Yeah, that would be nice. Like tomatoes. Like, who gives a shit, dude? This is America. You'd be free. It's a freaking plant. Everybody gets, oh, well, we're gonna take away your freedoms for security. I was like, nah, we're good on the security. We got the fucking, the Second Amendment. How about feeding straight dextrose to the feed water? I've never done it. I've really always done it the same way. I've always used molasses. The red dirt marijuana was traditionally stronger. Well, I don't know, but there is a lot of iron in the red soil out here. That's really high iron. That's why you see it. It's oxidized iron. Yeah, I would think so too, especially New Mexico, because we're putting in like gallons of like those 110-gallon tanks, or 100. Yeah, they're 110-gallon tanks. We do 10 gallons of feedstock. So that way, when what's happening is that feedstock turns over and it gets converted into all of these metabolites. So what's happening is basically the specific consortium that I use, so I start with the microbial inoculant and the feedstock, and we ferment it. And basically what's happening is they're multiplying. That consortium is multiplying together, and they're feeding up on all that stock. They're multiplying, and as they're multiplying, they're releasing all these like organic acids and different metabolites, phytohormones, just all types of stuff. So that way, when you get the actual inoculant, you're not just feeding in the microbes, you're feeding all of the chemical constituents that they produced that have benefits that do basically biochemical work on that soil media. Micro Plus is actually, bam, 30% off. It's the last day too. It's the last day, 30% off on the Micro Plus on the website. So just a FYI. What's my favorite soil? I use my soil. I usually just cut it I usually use my basic mix, but I'll cut it like 50% with like some cocoa to lighten it up. I've never used ground cinnamon for anything other than cooking. That's pretty cool. Is the herbal cut a good yielder? Yeah, it's a good yielder. The both the skunk cut and the herbal cut are really good yielders. They fucking produce chunkers, dude, like little grenades. And the crinkle cut doesn't have as good yield as the other two. But the crinkle cut's got that really sweet front end. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yep, that's what we were actually talking about here. Now we're just chopping it up. Yeah, I heard something about this too, this 3,000-year-old honey. And that's why, I think it has those antimicrobial compounds. Cinnamon kills fungus gnat larvae? No, I've never heard that. I use BC 1A and 1B. Okay, so when I did the F3 project, when I was making F3s for the line work on the skunk cut, the herbal cut, and the crinkle cut, I also had 2 of the original genetics. So I had 2 females of the Trainwreck Blueberry MK Ultra. That is basically like one of the parents to the Blueberry Trainwreck. And so what I did is I had 2 different phenos that got hit with that Blueberry Trainwreck F2 male pollen. So there's BC back across 1A is the number 1 pheno, and back cross number 2 was that second pheno. And I just labeled it so I would know for future use which line came from which mom, which I have both of the moms still. And I'm actually, as soon as I'm done, because today I'm going to go home and I'm going to pollinate my last 2 vials of black lime reserve pollen from my male that I had we had pollen forever, that we've done all the projects with, is going on to the chem dog. So I'm going to make more of those black D seeds because that shit was fire. And I want to run through a lot more of it. I have some right here. Look at that fucking motherfucker. This shit was fucking the business right here. This is Chem Dog cross to Black Lime Reserve. So yeah, I'm gonna make some more seeds of this. I think this was number 4. I don't even think I kept this one. It's nice. It's got kind of a different type of outlier. It's got like a little coffee, a little lime, a little kind of, I don't know, kind of musky. Pretty decent weed. That's a good little piece of advice. A little homeopathic remedy here from Valley Grow Boys. Well, anyway, I'm going to head out, guys. Thanks for joining. I'll see you guys next time.